Make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
My name is Meganwind Eoyang. I'm originally from Chicago. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area now. And something about myself. I've done a lot of different careers in my life, and I'm very happy with where I am and what I'm doing now. It feels like a culmination of many things that I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and now it feels like I can give back to the communities that I live in from a place with solidity. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is an experience of peace and vast space, open space. It's a sense of either my getting someone else or somebody getting me or me getting myself at a deep level. Beyond the stories and into the sort of the essential life of who I am or who someone else is. And each time I'm in that relationship with someone else, there's a moment, sometimes more than one, but there's almost always now a moment where there's that sense that it's me, this other person, and we are part of the fabric. It's like it's almost like a sacred presence happens when people are really taking the time to see where each one is. It's kind of delicious and rare. So I feel lucky to have put myself in work where it's part of my almost daily experience. Right. Well, it's like when the heart is open and not defended, because it's not about evaluations and judgments. It's like the same kind of open-heartedness that comes when a baby is entering a space and people's hearts just open. You don't have to defend against anything in front of a baby, you know. Or when someone has just died, there's this space. There's that wall, the gate between the worlds is open, and the hearts are just open. And that experience feels really precious to me.
So there's the opening then of empathy.
Yeah. I guess it's an outcome of empathy. It isn't the empathy itself, but as I say, it happens consistently enough that I'm a fan, and that's coming a long way because I didn't used to be a fan. I grew up in a pretty violent environment, and had to respond to violence in a variety of ways, sometimes inside the home, sometimes outside the home. And so the idea of having that sense of undefended openness with others is quite a freedom.
Would you like to talk about how that developed? You're going from a home where you didn't feel empathy to developing an awareness of empathy?
Well, it didn't come through verbal at first. It came through nonverbal. I studied Traeger movement education for years, and the person who taught it, Dr. Milton Traeger, a physician, he wasn't very verbal. He was pretty intuitive, and so we learned to connect with others. And the intention of that work is not to, like in Rolfing, the intention is that there's a particular structure that you're trying to bring somebody toward. In the Traeger work, it's more like, where are you now, and what would a little more free feel like? So it's like meeting a person where they are and inviting them to more space. And that, when I was introduced by one of my Traeger instructors to nonviolent communication, it was like, oh, it's the same thing, but now we're adding words. So there's a whole additional range of relational possibility that, you know, you're going to see very few people who are horizontal on your bodywork table. If nothing else, you can only see one at a time, you know. But in this work, I can be in a room with 30, 40, 50 people, and we can be connecting at that depth with words, and it's very powerful.
Is there any anecdote or story of where that happened that kind of stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I was in a social change workshop with Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote Nonviolent Communication, and he was asking people to talk about their most intransigent enemy image. And he was talking with this one or that one, and I was getting more and more upset. And finally, I jumped up and I said, what about the CIA agent who teaches the soldiers of a Central American government to torture their people so that they can force them to behave the way they want them to? And in a flash, Marshall became that CIA agent, screaming at me. At that point, I'd been studying for 2 or 3 years, so I went into empathy with what I heard him say, and then he screamed some more, and then I gave empathy for that, and then he started shouting, and I gave him empathy for that, and then he was talking with force, and I gave him empathy for that. Somebody else in the room couldn't tolerate the tension and jumped up and said, what good is this doing? It's not making any difference at all. And Marshall stepped out of role and he said, you're wrong, she's got me now. She's actually listened to me. And I notice in me a rising interest in what she has to say and what she wants, because she hasn't treated me like I was an asshole. And my heart was kind of a tremble, because this was my worst case scenario, my biggest villain in the world. And I wasn't really ready to start expressing to him yet, but I did have a sense of growing connection and growing respect. And the idea that I could have a sense of connection and respect with someone doing what that person was doing was amazing to me. It just shattered all kinds of ideas about what's possible and what's not possible.
You said you gave them empathy. What does that mean? What did that look like?
So when he said a certain thing, I tried to understand what could be in his heart behind it, what could be important to him behind that, like safety or security or integrity or alliance and partnership, just all kinds of things. I hated the way that he went about getting those things, but when I looked at what might be behind it, all those things matter to me. You know, I want safety, I want alliance, I want partnership. I just wouldn't want to go about it that way, but I could connect with him at that level.
So the empathy is looking deeper into him. It's like looking.
That's the tool that we use in the work that Marshall developed, which is both to check in with behind the surface of my judgments and thoughts, what matters deeply to me? Can I share that with another? And behind their judgments and stories, what matters most deeply to the other person? And I'm just going to try and guess about what that might be. What's really at the core for them behind what they've said? I had a situation at San Quentin where there was one of the custody officers had an office next to the little room where I was teaching a class. And for 20 minutes, he was yelling at the top of his voice, spit flying, making threats. It was a pretty terrifying experience because it was behind me. I couldn't see who he was talking to. And when we were finished with our lesson, he snarled something at one of the students I was working with, who left the building very quickly just for the sake of keeping peace. And that changed our procedures, that instruction in that moment from the custody officer. So I turned to the officer and I said, I want to check with you about something. And he turned around and he just looked like he was going to go off. And I thought, oh shit, here we go. I thought, I want to be sure that I understand how we can take care of what I need as far as these copies go and what would work best for you right now. And I could just see him deflate from this inflation and getting ready to counterattack to, okay, this is just a person. So he gave me instructions, he told me what would meet his needs and my needs. So part of what I was doing was trying to figure out, he wanted ease, and I wanted to be able to support the students by making copies of something that was inspirational. And by not giving up what was important to me, but also holding what was important to him, he was able to meet me in a way that I don't think he would have met anybody else in that moment.